and neglect. They're all stressful. And they all produce the same chemical. And that chemical does something unusual in the addict brain. It raises the bar that dopamine must hit in order to register the survival message. What? Okay. Once that metaphorical switch is thrown, that Dr. West talks about, the disease holds you hostage because it's the only thing that's going to ring your bell. Stress in the midbrain of the addict will reset the pleasure point under the influence of cortisol so that things that previously gave you pleasure no longer hit the mark. So you go to one of these carnival shows and you take a big hammer and you whack this mallet down and the bell goes up, or the weight goes up and rings the bell. For the addict or the alcoholic, imagine, if you will, that their bell is raised up another 100 feet. The usual mallets, the usual mechanisms don't ring the bell. They don't reward you. They don't give you the survival message. What are the things that can ring the bell for the normal person? Kevin McCauley, I love it when he talks about Disney World. Boink. My grandchildren. Boink. A wonderful family dinner on Thanksgiving. Dopamine. I'm getting rewarded. It feels good. The addict or alcoholic so often presents to us as anhedonistic. They're flat. You know, and you hear these pleading mothers and family, but he didn't even love my grandchildren. Or you know, and when you see them in recovery, they get up and say, I never knew food could taste this well. Or I've looked at a sunrise for the first time. Or look at the color purple in those mountains. That level of appreciation changes because when we're abstinent and in the recovery process, when the neurons start to re-network, the miracle of recovery that we now know biochemically is a resetting or a lowering of this level, so that your dopamine messages start to work again without the drugs. You see, if your level or your bell is high, what's going to ring your bell? We'll talk about that. Here's the neurons that pass dopamine around. Now, classically, in this simplistic picture, neuron A goes to neuron B. But you're born with 100 billion neurons in your brain, and you make it out of this world at the age of 95 without any significant substance abuse disorder, with still about 95 billion neurons. We only lose about 5 billion. Okay? That's pretty good. With some of the drugs we have now during adolescence, I hate to think what we could lose in just a few years. Okay? But this magnificent organ actually connects neuron A to up to 10,000 other neurons. So the mathematical possibilities for re-networking in the addicted brain are huge. There's our miracle. You follow me? Each one of these little dots multiplied up to 10,000 would each connect to one of these neurons. So if this pathway is damaged, then whatever process was lost can be re-networked to an alternative pathway. It's like having a subway into LA, if we ever got it, that had, 10,000 different roads and alternatives when one gets blocked. So dopamine has to come in a surge to ring the bell of the addict. And what's going to break through? What's the mallet that's huge enough to ring that bell that's 100 feet higher in the air? Methamphetamine, 4 fingers of bourbon, marijuana, cocaine, crack cocaine, fentanyl,
Winning at gambling,
internet gambling, process addictions, sex, whatever. The brain quickly learns that the drug can do this and creates the concept of craving to perpetuate this survival response, exactly the way that your breath did. The drug becomes the new coping mechanism, and we cannot choose not to crave. It's not an option. You could not choose not to breathe. The concept of choice is invalid because it doesn't take into account the suffering and craving for survival that a patient has. Okay? For example, let's take Grandma. A real sweet-looking grandma. Her glasses are down. Eloise, you might have had a grandma like this. Her glasses are down here, and she's got a big bosom and a little babushka, and she's knitting. And we put her on the bottom of a swimming pool and sit all of her beautiful grandchildren around her in a circle. And they're all knitting and having fun, and she's making socks for each one of them and a mitten here. And then we fill the swimming pool up with water. There's not a grandma out there who wouldn't be required to claw at, step on, push aside, and drown any of those grandchildren to get to the top and get that breath of air. It's the survival imperative. The disconnect in the brain. Now we know people who have given up their lives, okay, more philosophically, to take care of a loved one. But the imperative to breathe, to live, to get what you need is so strong that literally she may have to just claw. She wouldn't be conscious of it. It would be an unconscious event, but she would claw at, push at, step over anyone to get up there. The drowning man who needs air oftentimes will pull someone out of a boat. If you've ever taken an elementary life-saving course in rowboat safety, they tell you to take the paddle, the flat part, and you'll have to pat someone off the back to push them away because they'll drown you. Right? So this overrides any kind of governing values. Oh, not my grandchildren. No, I can't possibly do this. This isn't right. Driving drunk is illegal. You know, all of those things that we know don't make worth a darn. I mean, there is no choice. There is no choice. Addiction is therefore midbrain imbalance. It's caused by unmanaged stress, resulting in the effects of loss of control, craving, and persistent use despite adverse consequences. So there I say to you that this fits the exact model of a disease just like diabetes. We have an organ, we have a cause, and we have an effect. Addiction is a disease. Now, hopefully, if I have you in the believing seat, you'll see that now